Club, and today I am going to take you through how you can use both of our composition guides. It's included in our Crit Creek Composing Camp, and we also sell it in individual packages. So we have both a beginner composition guide and also an upper level composition guide. And you can use these for all different ages. What we recommend for the beginner composition guide, so if you see here, it has the rhythms, and it has rolling a melody, and then you can write words, which are optional. Also for beginning composition guides, we have it where it kind of mimics what you see in a lot of beginning piano books, pre-reading especially, where you just have the notes and the letter names. That is basically what we built our beginner composition guide off of. So I would recommend it for students who are capable of reading and writing fairly well, unless you want to work one-on-one with them, in which case they could do it probably as pretty early as the first month of lessons. The upper level composition guide can be used for students in a lot of different levels. So this does get into eighth notes, so you do want your students to know a little bit more with rhythm, and it also covers chords, which personally, I teach chords within the first 6 months of lessons. And if you want to know more about teaching chords, we have a blog post and also a YouTube video that I'll link in the description below, where you can learn how to teach chords and also get our free printable for that. The upper level composition guide comes with a worksheet where it's kind of like scratch paper, where you scratch out kind of the thoughts of what you're doing, but then also the goal is to write it on staff paper. And the staff paper we include has both clefs in there to make it easier. We also include blank staff paper in case your student wants to arrange in both treble clefs or both bass clefs. So today I am going to talk specifically about how you can use these composition guides to help your students do the most with composing as possible. First, just some simple tips. Remind your students that every time they write music, they have to write the clef first. Then if there is a key signature, that goes next, and then the time signature. Clefs go on every single system. The key signatures go on every single system, but the time signature only goes in the beginning. That is something I got confused so many times, and I wanted to write the time signature on every single one. Like, okay, they all go on every single one, but you only have to know once how many beats you're gonna count. So that, just having that pattern out there is really helpful for the students. For both levels, the upper and the beginner level, remind your students to space out their notes evenly through the beats. So like the upper level students, obviously within the measures, they don't want to have a measure and then their quarter notes are here and here, and then they got this big long gap. They want it to space it evenly without a measure. This also is a really good practice for the beginner students, where they just have that little block to write in. So if they've got 2 quarter notes, remind them not to write the 2 quarter notes there in the beginning, but to space it within the whole section. When your students are composing, always encourage them to take it to the piano and play. When I was doing different courses on songwriting and harmony and all of that, I did a lot of it at the table. The teachers I had at the time were more theoretically minded. I am more ear-minded. I do theory, but I really like hearing things, and whenever I arrange, I primarily arrange with, how does this sound, rather than what is the theory behind this. That's just not the way I arrange. But I find it very helpful for students also to help them rely on their ears. I think it's a misconception that composers always compose by theory. I think it was Haydn who primarily doodled on the piano first, found out what he wanted, and then he put it onto paper. And whenever I read that, I was like, wow, that is not what my teachers taught me. I was taught that there was a lot of theory behind all the composers, not that they actually were influenced by their ear. So I always like to encourage my students to play as they're composing, to play as they're arranging. How does it feel under the fingers? How does it sound to them? And then to make choices based off of that. So both upper level and beginner are guided compositions, but just because it's guided doesn't mean your student can't change it. I just did it guided so it would make it way easier for you as a teacher to help your students learn how to compose music with a little bit of structure. But the end goal of these worksheets is to just give your students somewhere to start. Ideally, you will want your students to be able to work out their own compositions and not be limited just to the composition worksheets. There are so many more rhythms they could do, there's so many more left-hand patterns, and definitely encourage them to explore, explore, explore. When you're working specifically with your beginner students, those who are doing the beginner worksheets, there are a few different tips I have for you. First off, you can use this if your student doesn't know rhythm that well. It would be awesome if they did, but if they don't, you can still use it. They do, however, need to know at least C, D, E, F, G on the piano. Be amazing if they knew all the notes, but at least those 5 notes, because they have to be able to play back what they did. So if your student doesn't know rhythm, what if you just started teaching this student and you want to take them through doing their own composition? I often do this for like the first week or 2 of my students. If I teach them 2 or 3 notes, I'm like, okay, let's create a song. And we throw in some lyrics and I ask them to choose different notes that they've learned that day to create this song. It might just be 2 notes, but they can do it. Well, with the beginner worksheet, you can have them roll a die. And if they only know 2 of them, they can roll number 1 or number 2 to get a C or a D, or whatever notes happen to be what they know. And you can guide them in creating their composition just based off of what they know. But let's say they know all their notes, but don't know their rhythms yet. Well, they can totally just do this 2 notes per measure if you're in the 2/4, 3 notes per measure if you're in the 3/4. And you can use this to start introducing to them the thought that, hey, if you see a time signature that has 2 on the top, that means there's 2 notes in a measure. Obviously, we know it's 2 quarter notes, but they will just think of that steady beat, 2 in a measure. And if there's 3, there's gonna be 3 in a measure. And if there's 4, there's gonna be 4 in a measure. And how many do you think 5 is gonna be? And so it's a way to start introducing rhythm to them, actually, if they don't know it yet. Of course, if they do know rhythm, then we have all of these rhythms that they can roll. Now, I did choose easy ones. There's just quarter notes, then quarter notes with rests, and then a half note. I wanted to keep rhythms that would be very simple that students would know within their first 6 months of lessons. This level of the composition guide is really good if you want to focus on rhythm. You can have your students roll a rhythm pattern and write out the rhythm pattern, and then you could do fun things with just the rhythm pattern that they've got written out. Basically, you're using this composition guide for more than just composing. They compose their own little rhythm challenge, and they can do it on drums or shakers or boom whackers or the piano, whatever instrument you have for them to have fun with. They can work on playing out the rhythms. And then, of course, they can roll their melody. Now, here's something I would do for some of my beginner students. Like I said, I like to teach chords very, very early. So sometimes I will teach chords with the piano keys, and it's before they know how to read music. They know all their piano keys, they might be doing some pre-reading, and they also know their chords. And so what I would have my upper level beginner students do, if they can play at least the C chord, is I would show them where they can play a C chord in their left hand while their right hand plays the melody that they composed. And that just makes so much more fun whenever they have their composition. So there's kind of like 3 ways you can use the beginner composition guide. You can use it with beginner students who don't know their rhythm, beginner students who know their rhythm, and then beginner students who know their rhythm and also know a little bit of chords. So that would be the 3 ways you could use the beginner guide. Now, the upper level composition guide has so many more uses because you're now working with students who have so much more knowledge base. There are some general rules when you have these students. First, I recommend when they're writing their compositions down to space their measures first. A lot of students will do like a measure, 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 and then they're like, oh, well, there isn't enough for 1, so we do like an extra long measure at the end. So I like to just give them that tip when they're writing music down to make it look really neat and professional, to space their measures first, write their music second. And like I said before, you want to kind of space your notes in with the rhythms. Now, the upper level students is where you can have so much fun with flexibility and experimenting with a lot of things, but let's talk first about using these for younger students. So I could use these for students who have started reading, maybe they know their middle C position, they can read it. I would totally use the upper level for these students. And I would just dictate, if they don't know their 8th notes, I would say, oh, let's choose our rhythms. Let's do quarter note rhythms, or let's do quarter note, half note rhythms. Maybe I would mix the 2. Maybe I would do the rhythms from the beginning composition guide, but then using the chords off of the upper level composition guide. So it's there's a lot of ways you can use this. The basic concept of the upper level guide is that you're going to use a chord, and from that chord, you're going to take melody notes. So I have made this easy in that every time there's a guide, I also write down all the chords, major and minor, and the optional notes, so they can just choose these notes. So your younger students who are using this guide, if they roll a chord, let's say they don't know their chords, but they know their note reading. So they roll a chord and you're like, oh, you rolled a 1, a C major. Well, your options are C, E, G. What do you want in your right hand? And just use the chord tones for the melody. But whenever they write their left hand, all they have to write is just a plain C. They don't have to write the actual C chord. So you can omit the last step, which is the most fun and creative step, is step number 4, where they pick a left-hand pattern. And this is the most advanced part of it. So if your student is too old for the beginner, but not quite ready for all of this, just tell them to write the root of the chord, a C, an F, an A, a G. And then if they have big enough hands, maybe you can encourage them to play it in octaves to give it a bigger sound. Another idea you can do with the left hand to keep it simpler is to change the rhythm patterns. So maybe do C in quarter notes or C in a dotted quarter note, eighth note. So depending on where your students' strengths are, if their rhythm is stronger than their chords, then do a single note but change the rhythms. Obviously, if their chords are better than their rhythms, you can do a simpler rhythm but having chords. There is so much flexibility. That's what I'm hoping you'll get out of this, is that like really the sky is the limit. I'm giving you ideas here, but the whole goal, and if I were taking students through this, I would constantly encourage them to do something different. If they've done the same left-hand pattern over and over, do something different. If they're very fast workers, if they have worked through all 6 patterns that we recommend, I would encourage them, look through your repertoire. Look at your lesson book. What's a left-hand pattern you really liked in the lesson book that you can add to your own piece? And honestly, I believe that the upper level composition guide can be used even up to late intermediate or early advanced students if these students have never composed before at all. There are some students who are very much, they're by the book, they don't know how to play by ear, it's so overwhelming to them, they need concrete guides to show them, here is how you do something that's not written down. And so if you have any students like that who are upper high school and they're lost whenever you ask them to do something that's not written down and make them write something down, the upper level composition guide is so perfect for them because they can roll everything and then write it down. But then once they have the basic, all of these are simpler, once they have this basic format written down, they can go beyond the suggestions I have here because of their knowledge of classical repertoire or other music, and they can take off of their knowledge and go from that, not be limited to this. So in a way, the upper level guide can also be used for 3 different level students. Those who are just beginning note reading and don't really know chords well, and then those who are your more intermediate students, I would say levels 2 and 3 would be exactly what the guide is written for. So you can just hand those level 2, 3 students the beginning composition guide and they'll be good to go. But you can also use it for more late intermediate and early advanced students who need encouragement to explore with more than what is written down and do so much more. Because the thing with music is you can take the same concept that is created with just the first level where it has a single bass note, and then you can take that same melody and change up the left hand even more, and then you can even take, and this is what we cover in the composing camp, you can take that melody and you can add passing tones and neighbor tones and embellish the melody, and then you could do the embellished melody with even more left-hand patterns. In a way, you see this in a lot of the classical composers whenever they do variations. They have like, here is variation 1, and then here is variation 2, and then variation 3. And they're all slightly different, but they have the same general concept. This is a really good thing you can do with your students, is you can create a form and variation with your students. And you can say, okay, let's just do very basic right here. And we're gonna do just like a triad in the left hand and the melody in your right hand. And then what will variation 1 be? And if you have enough time, and if you have students who are able to understand the process of variations, you can just keep going and build on it. Do something, one little thing different, do something a little harder, change up the rhythm, change up the melody a little bit, and keep going, keep going, keep going. This just gives you a platform on which to build. We provide the platform, and we want you to build. So if you have any more ideas about how you would use these composition pages, or if you have any questions, feel free to contact us at support@musicgameclub.com. Also, if your students are using these composition guides and you have videos of their compositions, I would absolutely love to hear them. Tag us at Music Game Club on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok, and follow along as we share more tips about what you can do to help your students have fun in the studio.